Hello and welcome to Space Chat with your host, Vinnie Denmark. Brought to you by Ring Pops. That's my shit. Tonight, as we celebrate the 40th anniversary of man's greatest achievement, we must also remember one of his most compelling tragedies. On January 28, 1986, few will forget the horror they experienced as the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded into flames. Tonight, we welcome one of the foremost experts on space exploration of the 1980s, Lieutenant Colonel Lawrence Byrd. Colonel Byrd has just completed his critically acclaimed book, Challenger, Triumph and Tragedy. Colonel Byrd, welcome to Space Chat.
Thank you for having me, Vinnie.
Why don't you tell us where you were on January 28, 1986?
Well, as second in command, I was at Mission Control in Houston, Texas.
Now, before we go any further, Larry, let's take a step back for some of our first-time viewers. Now, you say you worked for NASA, correct?
I do.
What does NASA stand for?
Well, Vinnie, NASA is an acronym, and as many people know, it stands for Need Another 7 Astronauts.
I thought it stood for National Aeronautics Space Administration.
No, that's just an urban legend.
Okay, now there are some conspiracy theorists out there who don't believe that this was an accident. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's many who believe that since the right wing of the shuttle fell off, that it was a left-wing conspiracy.
Is this some sort of joke?
Excuse me?
Are you making a mockery of the Challenger disaster?
Am I making a mockery? I just wrote a book about this disaster. I interviewed the family members of the lost ones. Excuse me, but I would not make a mockery of this situation.
I apologize, Colonel.
As you should. My goodness gracious, this interview was smooth sailing for the first 90 seconds and then it just blew up.
Again, I do apologize. Let's move on. You say you interviewed family members. Let's talk about that for a moment. I assume you spoke with Krista McAuliffe's husband?
That I did.
And what did you learn?
One thing that will always haunt me about my interview with Mr. McAuliffe was the fact that he said he would never ever forget Krista's beautiful blue eyes.
Really? She had blue eyes?
That is correct. One blue this way and one blue that way. Next question.
Lawrence, tell us, where do you find your information?
Well, for most of the information, I simply looked in the Yellow Pages.
The Yellow Pages?
Yes, in the Yellow Pages for the 7 astronauts, I just looked underwater.
Excuse me?
Oh, and I also used a variety of encyclopedias.
Having written a book this comprehensive, you must know everything there is to know about the Challenger.
As a matter of fact, I do. I know every little detail about that incident. As a matter of fact, I even knew the type of shampoo that the 7 astronauts used.
Really? How do you know that?
Well, because after the explosion, they found their head and shoulders.
Really?
Yes, and actually it was no surprise they had shampoo on board in the first place, because the astronauts decided not to shower ahead of time.
No?
No, instead they washed up on shore.
You tasteless son of a bitch.
Excuse me? Did you just call me a son of a bitch? I do not need to be spoken to like that. I have a book right now that is exploding on the New York Times. It is blowing up right now.
So the book's doing well?
Yes, it's rocketing up the charts, at least for the first few weeks, then it fizzled out. They were actually speaking of launching a TV movie based on my book, but that fell apart rather quickly.
Well, Lawrence, thank you for coming on Space Chat. And please join us next week when we interview Erwin Tragic Johnston, expert on the Columbia disaster. I'm Vinnie Denmark.